Hello, welcome to the July 19th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we'll begin in just a couple of seconds. Bear with me just for a moment. All right, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'm presenting from the United States outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you've not attended a Club Cubase live stream, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So if when asking questions, it's helpful if you could indicate which level of Cubase you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, and which level. So if it's Cubase 10, 10.5, 11, or Cubase 12, that information is helpful. And also what computer platform. So whether you're running on Mac or Windows, that information would be helpful. We will have a lot of questions. I will try my best throughout the live stream to catch up, but realize that I won't be able to answer questions in a real-time manner, but we'll try to go through each of the questions as they come in chronologically. So if you're ask a question and you don't see an immediate response or you don't hear a response, if we could be patient, and I'll try to get through them in chronological order. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that'd be appreciated. Also, we should have all the topics covered in the live stream today in the comments field, pinned with timestamps, so you could refer to all the topics that have been discussed today. If you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com and you could search through probably over 18,000 questions there. So Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to compile that. So we want to give special thanks to Jan. We have two people that serve as moderators on the live stream. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude are not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this out of the goodness of their heart and for the betterment of the community. So special thanks to them. And also we want to give a special thanks to Jazz Dude, who does a lot of work compiling information for the Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a lot of effort to really benefit the Cubase using community. So we'll give special thanks to Jazz Dude for that. As I mentioned, my name is Greg Undo, and I'm presenting from Alexandria, Virginia. If you are watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, and we will go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg, calling from Southwest France. You were so helpful last week. Yeah, no, I'm crawling. Could you possibly show the best way to use the tempo track? I find it really difficult. Okay. So when you come over here, if we have a tempo track, so I'm going to just come right over here and we will see our tempo track. We can make this larger, and this could be just by adding a track, and we could have one tempo track on the particular project. And if we wanted to add signature tracks, we could see signature tracks, which would be different. If we wanted to see the tempo track in kind of a dedicated window, we could just hit Control or Command plus the letter T, as in Tom, and then we could open up the tempo track editor. So when working with the tempo track itself, if we wanted to have tempo changes, the best thing to do is, as we just come over here, we could just see that the pencil, as we hover in our field here, that we could have our pencil automatically be engaged. So if we wanted to come over here, we could choose between two different modes. So sometimes one of the things, if you slide this over a little bit to the right, we can see kind of the step and ramp modes. So if I wanted the tempo to change at a specific point, I could say at measure 5, I wanted to come here and I wanted to go from 100 beats a minute to 130. So we could see kind of the exact time. As I move this up or down, we could set the particular value directly there. So right now we have this set to step. So at this point, if I wanted to step up, we could do that, but we could also choose ramp, and ramp would automatically, if I choose a different point, so let's say I wanted to come to 90 beats a minute, and that would just kind of do a straight linear tempo change between those two values. If you'd had already entered in some data and you wanted to be more precise, you could select a node and come right over here and just say from the info line, and then we say, okay, I want this at measure 8, measure 1, beat 1, 16th note division 0. And I wanted to take this particular, now when we work with our tempo, if we have the default combined selection and range tools, we can, if we wanted to select the tempo events to, move them up or down, we could do this. But, to select an actual node, approach it from the bottom. If you wanted to select a range and perhaps duplicate those tempo changes, we could use the range tool by selecting from the top area. So, and some other things that we could do tempo-wise is if we wanted to select, again, let's say our particular range here of points, we could, if we have multiple points selected, we could decrease. Or if we had multiple tempo values, we could kind of choose to do a retard or an accelerando. So we could adjust kind of the data here, so we could go up or down, or if we had a number of tempo changes that we just wanted to perhaps regulate and maybe make a little smoother, I could select these tempo events and move them all up or down, or be able to kind of compress or expand their differences. So we could just do some different tempo handling just like that. So we could say, okay, let's do the accelerando, but with those changes. And I wanted those changes to be, more pronounced for their differences, like so. So let me know if that helps. It's from Barry Lerve. Thanks for joining us again. All right, so we see Sir Robert checking in from Atlanta. We have Soren from Sweden. All right, we have Jan from Stockholm. We have Gadi from San Diego. Mitch Michelle checking in from Michigan. Dalsa Roof from Las Vegas. All right, Dallas had a question. My chat just jumped on me, so let me just find it. Okay, so it says, I know how to export an audio file, but how does an audio file with a video track export? So if you have a video file and you have it inside of your project, all you'd have to do is to just go to export. So go to file, and we wanted to take like our composition, our audio, our sound design that we have in our Cubase project. When we go to export video, at that point we could just simply export, and all of the audio will then be embedded directly within the video file there. So if you want to export the video with the audio from the Cubase project, go to the file menu and go to export video file. All right, so we see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We see Cubase Junkie says, hey, Greg, we appreciate you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a question. What's the difference between pre-gain to return gain, Cubase 10.5 Pro? Right, so when we look at a particular audio channel, we could have pre-gain. So pre-gain will actually, we see this directly here in the EQ on a channel strip, or you can see it and this will adjust the gain. You could attenuate the gain or boost gain by up to 48 dB before the signal hits any of the inserts, the channel strip, the EQ, or the actual fader output here. So that's what the pre-gain allows you to do. So if you're tracking and you need more gain or you need to attenuate gain, you could adjust that, and that comes as a simple gain before everything hits any of the channels. So it's used for that. And then we see to return gain. So I'm not sure if it's with the sends here. So like if we had, a particular, so I'm not sure if this is what you mean by the return gain. So, this could be attenuated, or if it's an effects return. So, if we had an effects channel on this, so let's say if we add an effects channel to the selected track and we wanted to just put a quick reverb on. So we say, okay, let's get to our reference. So now we have our effects return gain. So as soon as we would now come over here, this would allow you to adjust the actual gain coming from the effect. So if you had too much effect or not enough effect, you could bring more of that as the effect returns. But if I'm misunderstanding what you mean by return gain, if you could let me know, that'd be... All right, so we see Michael Pierce checking in from London. We were watching the news of the heat wave in London and all of Europe, so my thoughts are with you guys. All right, so we have Crank Command checking in, saying hi. We see Jazz Dude, of course. We appreciate everything he does. All right, so we see from Sam Brown, hey Greg, is there a quick way to do edit pitch in Very Audio? I double click the track, click Inspector, Very Audio, click again on the track once, and then I have to click Very Audio again, Cubase Pro 12. So let's say if I had an audio file here, let me just drag something over quickly that has some vocals in it that would make sense. So we'll come over here to Bloom. All right, so now if I wanted to make sure I'm understanding your question. Okay, so if I wanted to now just come right over here, let's say I have my Very Audio. So if I had the Very Audio tab here, we could just simply do the Very Audio editing directly in. Once this is enabled, we could do that. But if we wanted to, do it in the full-fledged sample editor, we could come over here and just make sure I'm in the right zone. So now we could see all of the audio directly there. So it seems like whenever let's say if I come here and I'm in hit points, so if I want to go to Very Audio, I could just click on the Very Audio and then have it do its analysis, and I could just do the Very Audio editing right there. So let me know if you're doing it a different way than I am. All right, so we have Sam Brown checking in from Goshen, Indiana, who just asked that question. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. If I set up an external instrument in mono and want to make the render to stereo, how? So probably even if you have a mono source. So let me just see if... I'll just take this particular track here. Let me just... Okay, so say if I have a mono source here, and we go to our export, and I'm going to just kind of split this stereo channel into mono channels using the convert tracks function. So we'll say multi-channel to mono. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to export this particular instrument here. Let's say, I don't think if it matters if it's an instrument or an audio file. But if we come to the render in place, so let's say I go to my edit to render in place and we go to our render settings. If I choose dry, that when we go to render in place, that it's now going to maintain the same channel width. If we come over and let's do a render in place, and let's say the complete signal path, and that would include if we're using different send effects and master effects. So now when I render, it's going to give me a stereo file. So just try to, when you go to the render in place settings, make sure that you don't have channel settings or dry, that you have the complete signal path or complete signal path plus master effects chosen there. All right, so see Robbie Bowling checking in from Dallas. Excuse me, I just got a text message from Chuck Ainley. I'll have to give him a call after the live stream. Okay, so we see a question. How about a tempo ramp? I'm trying to. How is that even possible? I'm trying to slowly increase the tempo linearly. Is that possible? So yeah, and just in case you didn't see it before, so say if I wanted to do a tempo ramp, I'll just start off here. So let's say I have my tempo. So what you do is just simply slide this over a little bit, and then we could just have the ramp. So set it from step to ramp, and then wherever you click, it'll now just kind of ramp up or down like so. So let me know if that works for you. So again, you could just set this to ramp as opposed to step, but you may have to just kind of knock this over to the right a little bit. Okay, so see, it's 37 degrees in Germany. So sorry that it's been so warm for you guys. I know how uncomfortable that could be. Okay, so we have a question. What's the difference between MIDI clock to MIDI timecode in the project synchronization setup? All right, so when we go to the project synchronization setup, so generally when we're sending, so we'll come over here to our project synchronization setup. So when we have MIDI clock, so MIDI clock and MIDI timecode are different things. So MIDI clock is often how people would synchronize drum machines to each other, so that and you have 24 parts per quarter note, so it's not the most highly accurate sync. But so generally MIDI clock is to just have like an external device that can follow external synchronized to the tempo and project. But MIDI timecode is often going to be interpreted, so often you have a SMPTE to MIDI timecode converter, and that will be kind of frame accurate so that you can have more reliable synchronization. So if you're synchronizing to an external like a tape machine, a video deck, or even, some people will use different computers and they will synchronize via MIDI timecode because that's going to be frame accurate. So it's going to be 30, like generally 30, it could be 30 frames per second or 29.97 drop frame or 24, depending on what SMPTE frame rate you're using. So that's going to be more accurate than sending MIDI clock. So MIDI clock is going to be a bit more rudimentary for synchronizing like a drum machine. But MIDI clock, you could synchronize Cubase to other devices. You could have Cubase, generate MIDI clock, MIDI timecode to synchronize other devices like tape decks, tape machines, video decks, and stuff like that as well. So those are the main differences with that. All right. All right, so we got a question. Hi, Greg. Can Spectral Layers 9 Pro be used instead of the included Spectral Layers in Cubase 12 Pro? So the included version is going to be a Spectral Layers 1. If you have the full license for Cubase, if you have the full license for Spectral Layers, we can think of Spectral Layers 1 as just a subset of features. I think it's actually the same program, but only certain things are open depending upon which license Cubase sees. So if you have Spectral Layers Pro and you start working with ARA2, then your Spectral Layers 1 is automatically functioning as a Spectral Layers Pro license. So yes, you can. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you still export an audio segment to a specific video file, much as you used to be able to? I'm thinking back to Cubase 10 or so, I think. So it used to be that there was a replace audio in video file function because Cubase didn't necessarily write. It didn't actually change and create a new video file, and people didn't necessarily like that because if there was an edit on the video, or if you're only scoring 2 minutes out of a 10-minute video, you would have to write the whole file to the 10-minute file. But now what Cubase does is it actually exports a video file just based on what the project settings are. So if you're just doing like a 3-minute portion or cue of a video file, but you have a 20-minute video file, it will just simply write and create a video file for the length that you actually have going in the project. So it's handled a little differently. So it's a bit more sophisticated and advanced in that it actually generates the video file now for you. See, Cubase Junkie it's going to tell me I had kind of ghost voices because he had another live stream playing. So I always do that audio test at the beginning. So, all right. So we see Mark Larcher checking in from Southern France. All right, so we see Brianna from Youngstown. So thanks for joining us. And we have Rob from Tarpon Springs. Okay, so we see from about the pre-gain question, the return gain on the external instrument. When you set up an external instrument, when you click on the instrument icon, there's a pop-up with a return gain slider. Okay, so yeah, when we have an external instrument, so let me just go ahead and add a track with an external instrument here. We'll just show you. So that's basically going to allow you, so let's say we have this. All right. Don't have that particular one, but let me just see if we could set it up. But just should have another external plugin. So say if we come over here, let's say we have our MIDI X. So we have this return gain. So this is like if you had an instrument that was not, let's say, it was a -10 instrument and you're connecting it to a +4 audio interface and you needed more gain going into it. So in this case, this would be before, as the signal is coming from the instrument, if you needed to add more gain to it, if it's not line level, for instance, that would give you an additional 6 dB. So that would be kind of like a pre-gain because that's the first source that the instrument is coming in. With the pre-gain settings, that's actually going to give you 48 dB. We can think of this as more kind of a correction. It's often not needed, but if you wanted to get a little more gain out of an instrument, maybe that just didn't have a lot of gain, like, I'm thinking, like early DX7, I don't think was the hottest output level, since of that era. So at that point, you could attenuate it here. So it's before the signal comes in, and generally, like, the pre-gain would give you an additional 48 dB. I think it's 48.2 dB a gain, and this could give you an additional 6. So. Okay, so we have a question. Greetings from Boiling Derby, UK. How to check if the copied setting from a third-party plugins give you the same tonal result on the Cubase stock plugins? Is there a way to lay over to see frequencies? Okay, so I'm not sure. One of the things that you could do, like let's say if we had... I'll just duplicate this track and I'll show you a little trick. So if you wanted to see, so I'm not sure if it's, so maybe this would help. So let me just duplicate this track. All right. So if you go into the EQ channel here, one of the things you could do is activate kind of the EQ comparison. So let's say I'm going to come here. And let's just go over to my drum duplication folder. So if I was playing both of these, and let's say I had different plugins on both of these particular channels. Let's say we're playing here. All right, so say if we're doing this and I had like maybe a different EQ setting here, I'll just do it via a plugin. So let's say, okay, I just want to put like a 10-band EQ here, like a graphic EQ. Okay, so one of the things you could do is as we come over here, we could actually see kind of the original drums versus, so we could see two different channels at once. So when I come here, we'll say, so as we want to just kind of look at these two different sources, maybe I'll just put in a different source here so it's more apparent. So we can say, okay, I want to look at my drums and just for demonstration purposes. So at this point, we could compare the two EQs. So we could see kind of the different frequency ranges, and then we could so if you wanted to see kind of what the difference was in the EQ, you can see both channels overlaid here, and you could adjust kind of the colors if you wanted to be more. So, and then if you wanted to come over here, you could solo between the two different sources. So let me know if that helps. If you're if you wanted to compare kind of like a stock EQ versus another and see the frequencies overlaid, you could probably do this using kind of the EQ comparison tool. So you could just activate the channel comparison in the EQ, and that will give you an idea. But if I misunderstood, just let me know. All right, so we see we answered Sam Brown's question about the Very Audio, so glad to hear it. Thanks for letting me know. We see Crocante from Los Angeles and Johnny Ray from Bay Area. Okay, so we see okay, so you see when I open 4 identical events at once on an audio track, example, kick drums or Spectral Layers, then 3 of it does play anymore. Further, it's not possible to edit all 4 events in Spectral Layers. Can you explain this? Okay, so let's say I'll just revert this. Okay, so say we have 4 identical events. Okay. Okay, so 4 identical events at once on an audio track with Spectral Layers, then 3 of them does not play anymore. So let's see if I come over to, we'll add Spectral Layers. And there was a Spectral Layers maintenance update that was released today, so 9:01. Okay, so let's see if, we'll just get solo track. So I just did it at the track level. All right, so it seems like that one played, and I'll just do some editing. We'll make sure all 4 of them play. Okay. All right, so let's say if we did some spectral editing here. See if I could. Okay, so I'll come over here. We'll delete that particular range. All right, so that one doesn't play. All right, so let me just check to see if we have it deselected. So it seems like they all play here. One of the things you could do in Spectral Layers, like let's say, is make sure that you right click, and sometimes if you hit deselect, because it may only play that particular region, but that seems like all of them are playing after doing edits to just one. So there's where we have the particular edit here where I cut this out, which we'll hear as we kind of come in. So we hear this hole here. And now when I go to playback, so try just right clicking and choose to deselect, because otherwise you may like do an edit and it may only play that selection. So you're listening to it, and you know, if you deleted something. So let me know if that makes sense. And I will just come over here and let's just jump back to no extension. Or if I did it differently than you did. I think that's from Roger. So. All right. So we see challenging question. My client uses Logic Pro and exports an AAF file. When I open it in Cubase 12 Pro, all stereo tracks are split and panned center. Is there a logical editor function to fix or other? So a lot of times it could be that, I know OMFs, I haven't checked in a while, but, sometimes, they will, because a lot of video programs may not deal with stereo audio files from historical legacies. So it could be that the actual AAF is automatically that the AAF file is, it's splitting, it's splitting it during the AAF creation. So you could ask the person that's generating the AAF file if when they import it back into their Logic Pro, if everything is going to be split and pan center. So there may be settings to do, but it could be that the AAF format just splits everything to all stereo tracks to mono. So I would check that. And one of the things you could do if it is split, like we showed earlier, if we come over here, we could say convert tracks. So let's say we have multi-channel to mono for these particular ones, that you could select those particular tracks here and maybe just go to your edit or your project menu to convert tracks, and you can say mono to multi-channel. Okay, I'll just take these out of musical mode. Sorry about that. And just do kind of a mono to multi-channel. And you could do it like that, but just see, I would have your friend that you're collaborating with see if they import their AAF file, if it's kind of split to do it. There is a preference in Cubase, and I don't think that this is it, but when you go to editing, audio, you check to see also if you go editing to audio, if you have split channels selected in the preferences here, and see if that is, if that's checked, you could try to uncheck that and see if that makes a difference for you. So we have a question: what is the best way to do tempo detection? Is using the tempo detection function, I would say. So let's say if I wanted to come here like to a jazz piece, so I could select the event here on my project window, go to project and do tempo detection and do analysis, and you could kind of listen to it here. See, like here we have some adjustments, or if I want to do like an offbeat correction, and then we've created just a tempo map of that performance just like that. So let me know if you haven't tried that yet. All right, so we have a question. How do I know when I play on my piano and record for alto sax that the sax is out of range? So it really depends on the instrument. So MIDI will be able to transmit, all 128 notes. So depending on the instrument library, some of them will actually, be very specific to particular instrument ranges. Sometimes you may want to have outside of the natural range of the instruments. So, one of the things you could do, it really depends on the sound source. So a lot of orchestral instruments, when you open them up, will not allow you to play out of range. So that, if you're doing like an orchestral mock-up, that you're not giving, notes that can't be played, like, D and C, low D and C sharps on string bass that generally, or on the double bass, parts that, notes that generally aren't there. Some people, will have a 5-string upright bass or an extension, but it's not expected for like an orchestral bass player to have that. So those are some of the, so really could, Cubase is going to record whatever notes are played, because, there's 128 possible MIDI notes. So some instruments will want you to have access to an extended range, and some instrument sounds will be restricted to their particular instrument range. So, Cubase will accept anything that's within the MIDI specification, and how that particular playback instrument sounds will, can actually determine if it's out of range or not. So. Okay, so we have a question. I note that you can perform free warp directly in the project window, but when I click, the lower zone happens. Can Greg show simply how to choose using Cubase 12? All right, so let's come over back to our other project. And let me see, I may have another project here that we could see if I have one I'm taking up real quick. All right, I'll just open up this one here quickly. Okay, so if we wanted to do like free warping just on the main project window, so let's say, okay, I'm here and I just wanted to take like the performance of the melody. Okay, so what we could do is I'm just going to switch to my warp tool here, and then we want to activate free warp. At this point, we could put in markers as we see fit. So we could just say, okay, I want to enable warp markers right here. You may notice that there's probably already hit points that have been detected during the audio process. And if we go to audio to real-time processing, we can say create warp markers from those particular events. Now, if you don't see the warp markers, it could be that, you need to be at a certain zoom factor to see the warp markers. So as we go, if we're here, you may have to kind of just zoom in a bit. And then once we have our warp markers, often it's good to have like, an anchor before or after. And all we have to do is, when we see the tool here, we'll see kind of the white vertical line to the left of the particular event here. So as we hover that close to a warp marker, at this point we could move and change kind of the rhythmic timing of that. And if we have our snap turned on, so let's come over here, and we could now just have this kind of snap to the grid. So we'll see that it'll just kind of snap directly to the musical grid right there. And that's how you could just do kind of warping. And we could do this across multiple tracks or one track. So once you have that done, just make sure that you switch the warp tool from warp grid to free warp. And then you could just simply kind of come right over there and be able to kind of warp directly on the project window, which is a great new feature of Cubase 12. And once again, if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button, and that enables us to continue to do these live streams. All right, so we have Detlef checking in from Dusseldorf. Thanks for joining us. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. I want to upgrade from Cubase. Sorry about that. Hit the wrong button. So hello, Greg. I want to upgrade from Cubase 10.5 Pro to Cubase 12. Do I need to save the settings of Cubase 10.5 Pro, and how? So generally, the settings will be migrated over automatically. If not, what you could do is open up your Cubase 10.5, go to your Profile Manager from the Edit menu, and then just simply export a profile, and then go into your Cubase 12 and import that same profile, and that would carry over all your key commands, your macros, and lots of other functions like your global workspaces, stuff like that. All right, so we just see, this is probably going back to the range of the saxophone question. So it says, does Cubase not know the range? You know, Cubase just accepts MIDI data. So it's, you could set up Cubase to not go out of range, but sometimes, you know, people may be upset that, you know, they don't have access. You know, for the longest time, you know, people would consider, like, you know, below an open E string, the lowest note on bass, but now it's commonly perceived as a low B for 5-string or 6-string bass players. So, but, you know, Cubase doesn't want to limit you with the particular options. It's the instrument that would, you know, if it's going to play and generate sounds in all of the different notes out of range, Cubase will allow you to do that. So it's really up to the instrument whether it takes advantage of having notes out of the range of the particular instrument or not. You know, Cubase sends 128 MIDI notes. That's part of the MIDI spec, which goes beyond, you know, what pianos are capable of doing at 88 keys. So, you know, we can still play notes beyond that if the instruments are designed to take advantage of that. So. All right, so we see Rick France checking in from Oregon. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from John Costigan. Glad you could join us today, John. Says, I have a strange problem which seems to be user error. I can't seem to remove VSTI by selecting no instrument in the list. So one thing that it could be, John, so let's say if we're here and we have a particular instrument. So if we have like VST instruments in our list, so let's say I have a string part here. So, or let's say a piano part here. All right, so that's coming from this particular instance of HALion. So, you know, if we wanted to come here and turn that off, but let's see if the instrument is frozen. Let's see if we could remove it. So I'll just freeze the piano instrument here. So if it's frozen, you might not be able to remove it. Let me, just in case if you unfreeze, but I'll give it a shot here, John, real quick. All right, so let's see if I wanted to come here and choose no instrument. So now that the track is frozen, I can't do that, but if I unfreeze the track, then I could come over here and choose no instrument. So let me know if you have like the track or the instrument frozen, John, and that could prevent the selection to another instrument as you describe. All right, so we have music all day, checking in from Michigan. Thanks for joining us. We have Peter, I believe, from Montreal. Okay, so we have a question. When I have external instruments, it seems like the export option is only real-time export. Can I change it to a regular export? You know, the reason it's real-time is because when using external instruments, that the sounds are being generated in real time through that instrument. So, you know, the instruments aren't smart enough to, you know, to play ahead of real time. So, you know, what Cubase is doing is capturing that in real time. And that's, you know, a limitation of external instruments, you know. So it's, you know, it's just kind of the physics that, you know, because it needs to have the tone generation from the MIDI information in Cubase, that it's not able to do that faster than real time. So it has to generate that in real time, and then that output from the particular instrument could be captured. Maybe some instruments in the future will do that, but none that I currently know of. So it's a limitation of kind of traditional legacy MIDI instruments, if you will. All right. Okay, so we just see a question or a comment from Filter Freak. Hi, Greg, from this record-breaking day in the UK. Thanks for the tip about comparison mode and EQ. I never knew it existed. Very useful. Yeah, so there's a lot of great stuff you can do with that. All right, so we have Ted Springman. Great to see you back, Ted. I'm considering an old 8-fader Euphonics MC mix. Do you know if it will still work with Cubase 12 on my 2019 Mac Pro Monterey? So yeah, it's, you know, Cubase still supports the Yukon protocol, so that will still work. So no problems there, Ted. All right, we have Matt Elston checking in from very hot London. So yeah, I feel bad. I know so many people don't have air conditioning there. I remember being in Germany 3 or 4 years ago when it was almost 100 degrees, and you know, the poor hotel trying to get fans for everyone. So. All right, so we have a question. Is there another way to place the cursor to change start playback other than the ruler? All right, so let's say if we're playing along here, you know, we could just click directly here. So let's say, I think if we hold down, if we have this tool selected, let me just, so I think if you hold down, so you could click in empty spaces. So say, but if you wanted to click on an event, I think it's just the Alt plus Shift key, Alt or Option plus Shift. So there's a preference for navigate when clicking on empty events, but you may not have empty events in your particular project. So if you wanted to come over here, just hold down the Alt or Option key plus the Shift key, and wherever you click, that will set the playhead position just like that. So if I want to start right here, Alt or Option plus Shift, and that's how you can do it. So you don't have to always go up to the main ruler, you know. And why that, you know, differentiation is because, you know, if you click here, you know, you're going to select the event. So while holding down Alt plus Shift, that will not select the event and just move the playhead position. So give that a try. Let me know if that works. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas has joined us. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. I think everyone's going to appreciate Michael's virtual ice cream today. All right, you see a comment from Sam Brown. Just thanks for answering my 3 questions. You guys are awesome. Thanks, Greg. You're welcome. I'm glad that we're able to help. All right, so we see from Contemplate Music, question, Greg, how do you record / broadcast your streams? Do you use third-party software / hardware or loop the mic into a Cubase? I've got 8 ins and 24 outs and seem to struggle to record a voiceover. So what I do for my live streams, and I just kind of set this up a long time ago, and I could probably update it. But I have so much to worry about kind of during a live stream of reading the comments and answering questions and try to give correct answers that I don't want to have to think about it. So what I have set up is I have my Cubase is going out to a UR24C audio interface, and my microphone is connected. So the audio interface output from Cubase is going into a Yamaha mixer. I use an MW12CX, and that mixer has USB out on it. So if I need to cough, I have a mute button I could hit. And so I combine my microphone into the mixer, and then I use the output of the mixer to feed into the streaming software. So I use OBS, which is free, so it's open source. So on my OBS, I just have it set to my Yamaha USB driver. So all the audio goes through a separate audio interface from what I'm using for Cubase. That way I could change sample rates. I don't have to have a particular audio interface. And if I have to cough or my son is knocking on the door screaming at me to get something for him, I could just hit mute really quick. So that's how I do it. If you have the Steinberg audio interfaces, I know other colleagues of mine, I think John Barron and like Mike Scheibinger and some of the other guys that are doing live streams will just use the loopback function of their UR interface. So, and that's if my mixer died, I would probably set that up, but I like having it kind of separate so I could open up different programs. I can open up different functions and change sample rates without worrying about it. So I have kind of 2 separate audio streams, one for Cubase and one for the live stream software. So that's how I have mine set up. Okay, so we see from Roger Cabo, and with this Spectral Layers question, it just says, select all 4 events at once and double click to open with Spectral Layers. Then in Spectral Layers doesn't select the corresponding events. So I thought it did that, but let me just go ahead and recreate it. So I'll go ahead and activate this. All right, so I'm here, and I'll just come over here to the Spectral Layers. So I'm putting it at the track level. So now when I double click here, I see the Spectral Layers. So, and let's say if I double click on this, and I'll just do like a painful selection. So now as I play the track back, so I'll just again deselect. So I'll just click on it once here. So let's see, we have this, we'll see kind of an edit in this one when it starts. So now it's just automatically following. So we see our hole, and I'll have another hole that I put in here where it's coming off like a filter. So I'm just doing it at the track level, and then whatever it's playing, it seems to automatically populate directly into Spectral Layers for me. So let me know if I did it differently than you did. See, Contemplate Music says, Greg, you're awesome. Your comprehensive answers, 3 minutes of your talk, condensed 40 hours of vague YouTube videos. You're a legend. So, thanks. I'm glad it was helpful. It's what's kind of good about this format is you can actually get your particular question answered. So I kind of like this format. All right, let's see. I think my timeline may have jumped. So let me see if I can get back. Okay. All right, so we see Tiago from Brazil. So I think I'm caught up where I was. All right, so Michael Teams is granted 10 gallons of peaches and cream ice cream for my family and myself. That's good. Thank you very much. It's not as hot here, so I'll forego 9 gallons to someone who's really suffering. So I think we're only at about 90 degrees today here in Washington area. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, how to export slices from the sampler editor into WAV format for later use. Okay, so we just revert to this project. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to drag this, so let's go to our sampler control, drag this loop in. Okay, so I'm going to slice. All right, so let's say. Okay, so we have our slice here. So now if I just drag this over, you know, you could do something like, okay, I want to take every, you know, let's say we've sliced it up and now when we play it back, then we could select that. Let's do, you know, and if we wanted to make this a bit easier, we could say, I want to, you know, spread each of these notes, like separate each of the notes out, but we'll show you without having to do that. But another way you could do this is let's go to the edit menu and let's go to render in place. So let's say, okay, we'll go to our render settings. Okay. So, and there's ways of being able to take each note if you, here, I'll show you a way. So let's say I want it to come here. This may be even faster. I will say, let's go to MIDI and choose dissolve part. And let's separate pitches. All right, and then all I'd have to do, so now each note is on its own slice. So I could now come here and choose to render in place. So again, go to the MIDI menu to dissolve pitches and choose to separate pitch, and now we'll put each pitch here that was generated from the MIDI file we dragged from the slice onto its own lane. And then at that point, it's going to automatically just take those particular samples, and we're going to render them all as audio files. We could replace it. We could mute the original sources, whatever settings that we had. But now each of these can be their own separate, distinct, independently rendered audio file. So almost done. All right, so now we look, and each of them is automatically rendered as their own audio file. So let me know if that is helpful. So again, just come over here to MIDI to dissolve part. Once you have it selected, and separate by pitches, and then you just render and place those particular tracks or events. Okay, we see Michael Teams wants people to whack that like button, so I'll agree with him. So we see question, hey, can we add a note repeat feature to the sampler track? That would be amazing. So yeah, it isn't in there. I'll pass it along as a feature request, but you do have kind of the capability currently within the full version of Groove Agent. So if I wanted to come here, I know it's not in, but you know, I think Groove Agent is on sale during the summer promotion. So let's come over here. Let's say if we add a track, and then we go to the Perform tab, and then you could activate kind of note repeat there, but it's not within the sampler track. But one thing that you might be able to do is that a lot of people miss is, let's say, you know, if we have a sampler track here, so let's say if we just have, so let's come here. All right, so let's say if I'm, but if there's a MIDI plugin, so if you get to like a MIDI insert, that you could do like a MIDI delay, so, or MIDI echo. So if you haven't played around with this, so this way you could take kind of just a MIDI note, and you could have like pitch offsets if you wanted to. So you could say, okay, let's make this, you know, 16th notes or dotted 16th. And if you don't want to do pitch offsets, you could just come here. So whatever. So, you know, check out the MIDI Echo MIDI plugin as well, because you could do some really creative stuff, and you could do like stuff that's, you know, pitched, and come up with some really creative things there. All right, we see Tiago just is making a contribution about the audio warp tool. It says to erase multiple warp marks, hold Alt, then drag mouse to select all to be deleted. So yeah, thanks for adding that. It's a great tip. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to open any editor windows or plugins on top when mixing and scrub to any places? Would be very handy. So, you know, with plugins, we could do this. So let's come over here. Let's go to Preferences. And let's say if we go to Editing, it might be under Project. Let me just see if it's under... so if you come here, we could just say plugin editors always on top, and you could have open effect editor after loading it as set up as preferences under VST to plugins. So you could try that with those particular aspects of the question. Okay, so we have a question from Tiago, a question about copy/paste warp markers between tracks, not pasting all marks from one event to the other. All right, so let me just... Okay, so let's say if I've come over here and I wanted to take like guitar parts here that were... All right, so if we want to now come over here, let's just add some... Here, I'll just go to my warp tools. All right, so let's say I wanted to add, and I'll just add some nonsensical warp markers. Here, so... All right, so let's say, oh, now I should have done that to both tracks simultaneously. So if I select this, we'll see that we have different warp markers. So I think if we have this, let's come over to the audio. And as we go to, where is it? It's a function, a menu function here. Okay, so we can say copy warp markers from selected event. Then I'll go and select this event, and let's go to audio, to advanced, and paste the warp markers. So now when we select both events, their warp markers will be consistent. Okay, so we see about copying maybe particular warp markers. I think it's going to be all of the warp markers, but maybe not all of the events. But if you have, you know, depending on your workflow, if you have both tracks selected, you could add across to multiple markers there. So let me know if that makes sense at all. And it's from Tiago. All right, so we have a question. Can Cubase display note heads with pitch letters in the score editor, or can Dorico do that? So Dorico could definitely do that. So let's take a look at Cubase. I don't think so, but let's take a quick look just to make sure. Okay, so let me just do a quick split staff. Okay, so let's take a look. So we'll just kind of zoom in. So I know Dorco is able to do that, but I don't think Cubase is. But let me just... Yeah, so I don't think it's in... Yes, I don't think Cubase has that, but I'm not... but I know that Dorco definitely does, so sorry about that. All right. All right. So glad that Benny could make the live stream, and you don't have to apologize for being late because he had studio work. So that's called living the dream. So, all right. Let me see. It's gonna be 100 degrees Fahrenheit in Sweden on Tuesday. So. All right, so we have a question. What do I do when I pull up a plugin and the sidechain button isn't showing? So generally, not every plugin is going to be designed to have sidechain capabilities. So if I, come over here and we see like a delay, you may not see like a sidechain show up there on that particular plugin. But if we go to our compressor, that we have the sidechain. So if you think that the plugin should have sidechain, make sure that you're using the VST3 version and not the VST2. It's a limitation of VST2 plugins. But not every plugin has sidechaining. So make sure that the plugin that you have that you're looking for sidechaining has sidechaining capabilities, and also make sure that if it does have sidechaining capabilities, that you have the VST3 version of that particular plugin as well. So, all right. Okay, reading through comments. All right, we see that Gareth and Pablo from Hot Mess are working and not able to make the live stream. So thanks for sharing, Michael. Okay, so we have from Diamond District Studios, is tuning in from Johannesburg, South Africa. Could you please demonstrate how room and headphone correction is set up in Cubase? I'm a frustrated Pro Tools guy. So generally, you don't want, so a lot of people assume that they would put like the room correction on their master channel here. So you do this and you're like, okay, I have all these different plugins, but if you put it on the master channel, that does affect the sound. So often what you want to do is to correct your monitoring environment without affecting, but you don't want those corrections to be automatically embedded when you export your final mix down. So probably what makes most sense is to open up the control room, and then if you go to the control room, you have inserts. And at this point, you could run your room correction or headphone software as an insert in the control room. So this is just strictly the monitoring path. So as you go to monitor, it'll still go through this, but it won't be included it won't be kind of embedded or included when you do an export audio mixdown. This is strictly for monitoring. And that's what makes the control room so great for that. So just do it there. And so many people, it's like, yeah, I did this mix and I exported it and played it in my car and it sounded terrible. That's because it was applying all of the room or headphone correction to the final mix. So it's kind of making up for deficiencies in your monitoring environment, and it's applying it to the file, which you don't want. You want your room to be corrected, not the file that's being generated. So run it as an insert in the control room, and then that way it's only for the monitoring path, which is really the intended use of those particular types of plugins. All right, we see Nick is running late because he melted today in the UK. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a feature for Groove Agent 5 that will automatically activate the outputs on pads that I'm using instead of having to manually activate them? So I don't know of a particular function that, that will activate, that will automatically activate pads that are in use. That it could be problematic because it could be, maybe that sound isn't like, let's say you have a snare drum and the snares like going into the hi-hat mic as well as the room bleed into other microphones and the room overheads as well as the the overheads and the room mics. So when you hit a snare in Groove Agent for an acoustic agent kit, it could automatically be in 6 or 7 different outputs depending on how it's running. So it's kind of done manually at this point. So I don't know a way to do that, and that could get you into a lot of problems if you add a track and then the output isn't there afterwards. After you've done that automatic type of thing. So that's why it's kind of set up manually. All right. So we see, is it possible to open any editor windows or plugins on top? So, with these settings that we looked at before, when you go to the preferences, go to VST plugins, usually it's automatically plugin editors always on top and open the effect after loading it. So those can always be on top. Some of the editors will be different. So if you're kind of in full screen mode, like the mix console doesn't have an always on top, and I think the key editor doesn't, but like some of the sample editors and other editors can. So check that preference. Okay, just my chat line just jumped. Just trying to find my spot. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. How can you update a user preset without go and looking for the name between thousands and thousands of presets? So there's probably a good chance that you haven't done. I'm not sure if you've created thousands of presets, but if you go to media and just go to user presets and say, okay, I want it to go to, effects chain or VST effects presets, and you can say, okay, I'm looking for delays. That now you could just kind of narrow it very easily using kind of, say, okay, maybe I did a reverb preset. I could come over here and just, find, just through kind of searching and kind of a Boolean search, all of your user presets. So, if I had thousands, I could narrow it down. So I find most people aren't doing 10,000 presets for a particular plugin, but you could narrow it down quite easily just using the media bay. So again, just come over here. Let's say if I was looking for a guitar amp, I can say let's go to my VST, my user presets in media bay. To my VST effects, and I want it to be, distortion, or kind of whatever. We could just come over here and see our particular. So I want to see my supervision presets that I've done. I could just come over there and again, just kind of find, my user presets and kind of, be able to refine the searches quite easily using the media bay. Okay, just reading through different comments. All right, wonderful to see JVI back on. Okay, so I just see a comment. This from Got Your. Says they won't render in place. They won't copy automation when moved. Maybe I have a setting set wrong, or maybe it's the way it is. So let me see if I can find if there's another. I'll just scroll back a bit and see if I could find the original post. So maybe the particular event or track is frozen. But I don't recall the exact question. So if you want to ask again, just for clarification, Got Your. Okay, so we see a question. How can I record a track/song from SoundCloud or any other online streaming platform into an audio channel in Cubase? So I'm not sure if you're running Mac or PC. There are some utilities that will allow you to kind of do internal audio routing. You could still always just take, if you wanted, if your audio interface has loopback, you could just simply stream and record the signal right back into your Cubase. I think you should be able to do that. So some audio interfaces will have that capability of having a loopback function. So you could use that. So if you let us know like which platform, I think some people would also use, what is it? The Banana. I'm just trying to, there's like a little Banana live stream kind of utility. I think Jazz Dude uses it with his. Just blanking on the name, having a memory cramp. But you could look into, some of those other functions, you could always take the output of, your audio interface, and just, do an analog in, capture. So, but it's often that, those systems aren't playing through ASIO. So. Okay, so we have a question from Vicente from Brazil. How to record audio from the chord track and MIDI to audio track? All right, so, if we have a chord track, so let's say if we start off here and, so the chord track's going to generate, MIDI data, and if we have it being routed to a virtual instrument, so let's say if I come here and I wanted to audition, all right, so let's say we have this going as chords. All right, so, if we wanted to come here, so I have these being played through this Rhodes patch because I have the monitor enabled. I could drag these down to the Rhodes patch so that the actual notes live in that track. And then if I wanted to turn those into audio, I could just come over to I could render in place if I wanted to. So let's make it all one contiguous event. So we'll just say as one event and hit render. So then I could turn the chord track into audio and record the MIDI as audio just like that. So let me know if that would work for you, Vicente. Okay, so we have a question from Loading Soon. Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. I have a question for you. Do you know if it's possible we can split the signal in the mixer fader so we can see RMS and peak separately? So currently, I think that when we go to, let's say we're playing this, let me just select these events here and I'll just put it in. So I don't know of a way to split it. I mean, we could come over here and, because these would be, you could come over if you wanted to have like an instance of, let's say supervision. Here I could, say, okay, I want this level. So say, okay, so we select this one. I want it to be, different metering scales. So I can say we want CAT system 20 for that one. So if you wanted to have this set up as you would solo tracks, you could have different kind of metering options there using, so if you want to see multiple options, but not a way that I know of kind of on a track automatically to show both simultaneously. All right. So we see DJ FK has to check out and wants me to keep up the great work. Thanks for the kind words. All right. So Greg, last question for me. You could ask as many questions as you want. Any chance you could explain what is your favorite and most precious feature in Cubase? And what was their biggest leap from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12? Please elaborate. I don't know. To me, I still I've been running Cubase since 1991. And I still love the fact that I could right click and have the tools, and the basic functionality hasn't changed, of like how we can visually move musical elements around with it. And when I first got into Cubase myself, that's what it really attracted to me. And I remember looking at the Notator brochure and studying it, and I thought that they had a better brochure, but the Cubase concept was better. And we could see that every company has kind of migrated to a Cubase style presentation of your data. So I love that Cubase hasn't really changed that. That the same core functionality of right click to get your tools has been there since Atari and hasn't really had to change because it was the right and correct concept way ahead of its time. Being able to edit while your music plays. Stuff like that we, so many things we take for granted, Steinberg pioneered. My favorite feature from Cubase 11 to 12, it might be just like, having, one that I didn't think that I would use as much, but after kind of doing some editing on projects, I think I like the, warping on the project window, I think is really wonderful and a great addition. And I tend to use that more. But I think that the features are like really well thought out, and do a lot of wonderful things. So I like for my personal work, I wouldn't do FX modulator. I don't do many personal projects just because I would take that time and spend it with my son and my family. So I don't do many personal projects or as many as I would like. Or I don't do as many, but I think the FX modulator is just kind of brilliant in being able to take something and sculpt it really interesting as well. So, but I'm sure I'm leaving out just there's hundreds of new features at every version. So. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, so just reading some comments from Got Your about rendering in place to being different for instrument tracks versus MIDI tracks going out to an instrument rack. I think I'm sorry if I missed the original question. Maybe it was directed towards Cubase Junkie. But sometimes if it's just MIDI, Cubase doesn't know its full path when it's just MIDI. So if you want to do a lot of rendering in place, that's why it's always good to consider using the instrument tracks because Cubase knows the full data path. All right, so we have Uno Memento checking in from Estonia, following Mobilely on the road. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Andre from Isum in Germany. reading through comments. All right, so we see from Got Your, just I think it's just Cubase Junkie says, I learned never to use the rack version of VST because of this, except when using Groove Agent because I want multiple outputs with Groove Agent. So you can't have multiple outputs with Groove Agent. So I guess the question would be, if you have, can you have multiple outputs with Groove Agent as an instrument track? So you definitely can. So let's say if I'm here and I open up Groove Agent and I'll just play a particular pattern here. All right, I'm just going to revert this quickly. Sorry about that. So if you have a virtual instrument like Groove Agent that you want to see multiple outputs, you could do that. That was originally a limitation of the differences between an instrument track and an instrument rack, but that was, I think, maybe Cubase 8.5 or so. That was kind of done away with. So let's say I will come over to this Groove Agent instance and so if I wanted to have access to all of my different instruments here as different outs, so I'll come over to my instrument pads, and so we go to my media rack here. So let's say we go to the VST, and I'm just going to add multiple outputs. So I'll say activate outputs. So even though this is an instrument track, and those outs are kind of just assigned automatically. So when we come over to our mix console, if we wanted to now just say, okay, let's take this kick, let's go to the mixer. So now we could have all of our outputs. And if we click here, like where we'd open up the automation lanes, we could see kind of all the outputs being mapped directly there. So if you're using if you're using like an instrument rack just because you want multiple outputs in Groove Agent, that's not necessary. So. All right, wonderful to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi from Big Tent in Nashville. Missing you guys. Hope you're both well. We'll get to some of your questions, David, as we move on, see how we're doing on time. All right. Okay, so we see a question from Best Korean Jesus. You showed me the hardware mapping for Groove Agent last week. Is it possible to have Groove Agent retain those per track versus being a global configuration? So I think, if it's with the hardware mapping here, so we turn this on and then you could map, different sounds. So now that we have the edit learn trigger note, I could click here and say, now I want this particular note to trigger. Let me just, so now if I wanted to play my snare, I could use that particular one. So if you wanted to do it, I think that's going to be for the track. So if I add an instrument track and let's say we go to Groove Agent SE, that those settings are going to be like not global, but for the track. So let's say now we're here. I can see D1 and G#1 there. So let me know if that's what you mean, Best Korean Jesus. So we see last week I tried removing racks. I tried using racks to see what the difference would be. Couldn't even remove them from the project after adding them. All right, so when we want to remove racks, let's see if we could show you a little trick with that maybe. So I'll come over here and let's say we're going to add an instrument rack. Okay, so we'll add, say, just a pad shop. All right, and as we do this, it's going to open up pad shop. We're going to create our track. So we see pad shop here. All right, so if I wanted to get rid of it, all you have to do is in the instrument rack, just choose no VST instrument, and then it's removed just like that. All right, my chat field just jumped, so. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. What is the list editor and when it can be useful? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say we'll just come over. Okay, so let's say we'll just open this project. All right, so the list editor is going to, really show you everything that's in a particular project. And this is could be more kind of old school, early 90s, late 80s, sequencing workflows for a lot of stuff. So most of us are used to seeing stuff in, a piano roll editor, and Cubase really pioneered this whole concept of being able to edit while played and be able to see the pitches graphically, kind of like an old piano roll, so the key editor. But there's also another editor that's available called the list editor. So the list editor shows every single thing that's in a particular track. So often when people will call me up and say, oh, at this point in the song, something weird happens to the MIDI part, it goes down, or, it gets behind or something like that. So when we go to the list editor, this will show you, every single note message, every single controller. So let's say on this part, if I wanted to now come and let's add some other CC data. So, it used to be like when I first started doing work for Steinberg, a popular keyboard was the Roland D50. So, and that keyboard was notorious for spitting out lots of aftertouch if you press down on a key. So let's say we have all this and we open this in our typical sequence view. So let's say, okay, we want this to, show only, let's say, velocity. So we're playing this and everything sounds weird. So the list editor is really great at being able to come in and say, oh, there's a lot of this controller. Here I see controller 11. Why do I have expression? So what the list editor can do is kind of expose everything, kind of like a microscope, because it's not just looking primarily at the notes. We could see the notes, but we could also see lots of other data here. So let's say, okay, I see that I have CC11, And let's say I didn't intend to have like CC11 or aftertouch messages. So what I could do is come over here and we could choose to, I think if we come over here, you could go to like a filters area directly here. And so we could say, okay, I want to take focus. I want to do event types in data 1. So now this is showing me all of my CC11 information. I could select all and delete. And now we could come over here. So if I had aftertouch that was clogging up and sending lots of unwanted, unnecessary MIDI information, we could use the list editor to kind of find those particular elements and kind of see exactly what's going in. Now, the list editor, we could also come over here and see like standard MIDI file controllers. We could also choose to, if we wanted to input like sysx messages, we could come right over here and be able to enter in like, hex streams for sysx data, or if you want to put like the name for standard MIDI file data. So you can insert kind of some other different types of MIDI information that aren't always apparent on the key editor. So those are some of the great things that you could do in the MIDI list editor. So if you're ever in a situation where it's like, oh, why is something strange, and you don't feel like you're seeing what's causing a particular issue with a MIDI event, go into the list editor and you'll probably be able to find it very quickly there. All right, so we have a question from Brian Sawyer. Says, when using chord pads, it places chords as a full measure. Sometimes I may want to shorten or lengthen them. It shows that they change size, but the MIDI notes remain the same size. Can you fix? Okay, so let's jump back to this project here. Okay, so let's just add some different parts in the chord track. Okay, so let's say, okay, so we have our chord progression. I'm going to copy these down to our chord events. So one way of doing this, if we have like all of the events selected, let me just do that again without altering the length here. Okay, so if we have all of these events selected here, we could go to the sizing applies time stretch, or if you just hit the 1 until you see like the little clock, now you should be able to take all these events and time stretch it. So now when we go to look, we can see that the notes themselves have been time stretched. So once we have all the events selected, if we wanted these to be 1 beat, I could just come right over here. I could say, okay, let's have these snap to be 1 beat long, and then you could you can see that the notes reflected there. So you could do time compression of the MIDI events once you have the object mode set to sizing applies time stretch. So give that a shot, Brian. Let me know if that works out for you. And you can make it longer as well if you wanted to. Okay. Okay, yeah. So I see Jack Shot Records is saying the voice meter banana was the one little utility that people often use. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to hide groove patterns when I create a drum map from Groove Agent? Not really sure how to use the drum map setup page. Thanks in advance. Okay, so let's say we have like our Groove Agent here. So let's say I'll just get to like a Beat Agent kit. So let's say we have this kit. Okay, and here we're going to have patterns. Okay, so I'm going to have Cubase automatically make the drum map based on the instrument. So if we come here and go to drum map setup, so say no drum map, and I will come here and say this is Groove Agent can automatically create these. But if we don't want to see them, let's go into our drum map setup. So here we could see that we're going to have different notes that are just going to be triggering these. So, you know, like patterns. So notes can trigger patterns. So if we don't want those, you know, we could choose, let me see if I'm not sure if we could delete these. But let's say if I load up just the kit itself without the patterns. Okay, so now I have only the particular sound, so I will delete the pattern group. Okay, so we come here. All right, so I'll just start from scratch here just to show this. So say we'll just load a kit. We'll say Urban Ballads. All right, so we go to the patterns. There's no patterns here. So, and now when we go to create drum map from the instrument, none of those particular patterns will be incorporated in the drum map. And this is kind of a unique Groove Agent thing where it's automatically making drum maps based on that. So we'll see that the first sound will just automatically be directly there. One of the things that you could do also is just choose to, if we wanted to go to, let's say we have the full kit here. And let's say if I move this up and we double click that, we can see all of the different patterns here. So let's say we're in our drum map. You know, if you have only particular, you know, sounds, so let's say you have like, you know, just kick and, you know, one of the things you could do in Groove Agent is to show drum sounds in use. So this way you could say, or show drum sounds with only events on them, so you don't have to see everything else. And let's see if there's a way to hide particular ones. And let's see if we go into the drum map setup, if we could hide from within there. You may not be able to, since this was, but if you manually create the drum map, you could choose not to include the different things. So let's come over here and see. So we'll look at the Urban Ballads kit. Yeah, so it looks like once it's automatically been created, it might automatically include everything, including the particular instruments. But if you could let me know if there's a reason you don't want the patterns. So we see loading soon, just saying, not sure if Greg is really seeing our questions or not. So yeah, it does, but it takes a while for me to get to him. So I'm probably about a half hour behind. So sorry about that. We have lots of questions. So. All right, we see Graham Witcher is very hot in UK, and he's looking forward to his ice cream from Michael Teams. So we see from Soren, my Cubase is on Android glitches. It has playback and then pauses 1 second, then playback 2 seconds, then pause 1 second. No smooth playback. If I restart phone, smooth but error comes back. So, check to see. I run it on my, I have a Galaxy F20 or S20 FE, so it's about 2 years old. Almost 3 years old now, and that it seems to be doing projects fine without much problems, but I haven't pushed it so much. But if you could let us know, if you want to email me what your Android device is, what the specs is, so I'd be happy to kind of pass it on and see, and if you do one track at a time and see if that makes a difference. All right, so we see ITSDJ King. I want to shift from Logic to Cubase because I feel Mac Audio is drivers not working for proper, and I buy a new Windows PC for Cubase. Well, welcome to the Steinberg family. We hope that you're able to transition to Cubase, and we'll be here to answer any questions for you if you need help. All right, so we have a question from Paul Claridge. Hello, Greg, again. When using the free warp tool, how do I delete a warp marker I put in by accident? Okay, so let's say if we're here and we're in our free warp mode, and I'll just kind of zoom in so it's a little more obvious for everyone to see. So let's say I put in, okay, I'm here, and I'm just kind of putting in my warp markers, and I put in that one accidentally. Hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you'll see it turn into like a pencil, an eraser, and then you could just click. So as soon as you hold down the Alt or Option key, if you go to the top, then you could click to erase the free warp marker. So let me know if that works for you, Paul. All right, so we have David M. checking in from Liverpool. Glad you could join us. All right, so we have a question from Anna Maria. Is it Cernat? Hello, I just joined. Thanks for joining the live stream. Can I use a new MIDI remote feature in Cubase 12 to control third-party plugins? Certainly. So I don't have a lot of third-party plugins, but I think I may have a synth here. So let's say if I go to my instrument and I'll open up Noisemaker. So if I want to control a particular parameter, one of the things you could do is just come right over here. So I'm going to just have this set up for my MIDI remote. So let's say, I'll just kind of scroll over. So let's say, okay, we have my Choice OS controller here. Great little MIDI fader box. All right, so if I wanted to, control particular functions, so let's say, what I could do, is if we have this controlling our I'll just go to my mapping page quickly here. So let's say if I wanted these to go to quick controls. So I just want to come here. Let's go to our mapping page. Sorry about that. Open up the wrong one. Okay, so now we'll say, okay, let's pop over to the choice os. So I have this, and I wanted to assign it to VST quick controls. So we could come over here, say focus quick controls, apply the mapping. Let's go to quick control 2. So I'm just taking an 8 fader box and mapping all the controllers here to quick controls. Okay, so now we have those set as quick controls. I'm going to come directly over here to this plugin. So now when we come over here, we can say, let's go to the QC controls, and then we can say, okay, I want this controlled. So if we click on learn, I could just say, let's move that. And I want to click on, controller 2, so whatever function that we want. So I want controller 3 for that. So now when I move the parameter, I could just control kind of different functions right here, just using my quick controls for that. So we can map our 8 quick controls, and they could be used for just about any number of parameters. So say, okay, if I even want a lot of plugins, you could just right click on parameters. But if you have this set, you could lock the particular parameters to those particular controls if you wanted to. So, but just click on the QC, and then you could use quick controls for just about any particular function that you want right there for different parameter control right there in Cubase. So definitely you could use it with third-party plugins. And welcome to the live stream. Hope to see you on more. Okay, so I see I got an email from Soren, so thanks for that. So I see from Got Your, just says, you missed the full question. Yeah, if you want to just repeat the question, I know it's a little, it may take me a little while to get there, but if you want to do that, then I'd be happy. Okay. Okay, so see from Got Your just saying has nothing to do with external MIDI, the different behavior of a VST instrument that is set up as a rack versus a track. They won't render in place, and they won't copy automation. All right, so let's take a look. I'll just do a new project. All right, so I'll add an instrument rack. Okay, and then we're gonna come over here. Let's go ahead and load up a preset. Okay, so I'll just okay, and let's go ahead and I'm not sure where you're doing the automation from, but let's say I'll just come back over here. We'll automate. Okay, so let's come over here and let's just do All right, so there we see that the instrument rack has been rendered with the automation carried over. So we'll go ahead and listen to it. So it says, different behavior of the instrument, VST instrument that is set up as a rack. So it says they won't render in place and they won't copy automation. So let me know if I did something differently than you did on that. It looks like that worked kind of as expected. All right, my chat field just jumped, so let me. Okay, so we have a question from Spike Williams. Great to see you on the live stream. Is there a way to get the Spectral Layers Pro layers to separate tracks in Cubase? So yeah, certainly. So let's come over. Just find an audio file that YouTube won't ding me on here. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. So let's say we'll just listen to it. 2-track here. So let me just turn this down to kill. So far as to pretend that I didn't care. All right, so let's say we'll do this, and I'm going to go over here to Spectral Layers, and we'll show you how to do this. So okay, so we'll go to process, and this may take a couple minutes, but we will go to layers, and then we'll say unmix stems. So let's say we'll just do vocals, piano, drums, bass. So we'll hit. Okay, we'll let it do its thing. So what this is doing is basically separating the different instruments automatically into different layers. And that's hence the naming convention for Spectral Layers is just the layers. So I often describe this as almost like unbaking a cake and taking the eggs out and putting it back in its shell afterwards. Okay, we're about a third done with this. See if there's any other questions I can answer while this is doing processing. All right. It'll probably mess up my index, so we'll just let this go here. I've never tried it on this file before, but we'll get an idea. almost about 62% done. Slowly getting there. Hang on a second, my son's knocking on the door. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. My son, we just got a cat for my son, so he's very happy. Just got it from the animal welfare. All right, so we're just about done here. All right, so now what this has done magically, it's put these into different stems. So if you have Spectral Layers 1, which comes with Cubase, you have just the ability to remove vocals, but now we have, I could come over here. So I could remove the vocals. If I want to remove the drums. So if I want to now take this particular tracks, I could just say, okay, I want to take the drums, the piano, the vocal, and be able to drag it to the timeline. So as we listen to this now, and if I wanted to just adjust some different things, I could come over here. So let's say I have them all just kind of spread out. At this point, you could just, take your different layers and make it louder or softer as well. So that's really all you have to do. So it's pretty magical, pretty scary what you could do. Okay, so we see kind of just a follow up from Best Cream Jesus about the Groove Agent. So is there another instance of Groove Agent that will retain those settings, new instances as well? I would like to know if I can make it per track versus global. So this is, I think, where we changed the Groove Agent. So let's say if we come over here to the Groove Agent and we had changed kind of the mapping for a particular kit. So, if you've done that, if you wanted that, and just make sure I'm still, so retain, if you wanted to retain like those mappings, where we come over here, you could just simply save it as a user preset and be able to open that up at any time. So let me know if that makes sense. If you just save it as a preset, then all the mappings that you've done, so you don't have to change banks on a pattern, or like on a drum pad controller. So. All right, so we have a question from Greg Busby or Busby. Creating a new track in a project window, and it appears along the other tracks in my guitars folder. In Mix Console, the new track is by itself near the end. and not with the other guitar tracks. How to fix. All right, so let's say, all right, so let's say if I have number of tracks here, so let's say we have 16 tracks. Okay, just reread this. Okay, so let's say there's a guitar folder, so I'll come here. And let's say I'll put these into a folder. Okay, so creating a new track in project window appears along with the other tracks in my guitars folder. In mix console, new track is by itself near the end, not with the other guitar tracks. How to fix. So I'm not sure if you have hidden tracks. So let's say if I come here and I have all these tracks and let's say these tracks are all hidden, and then I add a guitar track here. So let's say I add a track. So I'm going to add an audio track, and we'll call this guitar test. Okay, and now when I look at my mix console, it could be that there's a little setting here where you could say sync project in mix console. So if that is off, let's say we go to my mix console here. All right, let me just do that test another way. Sorry about that. I hate that Apple feature. All right, so let me just, I'm gonna make all of them visible. So I'm not sure if you have track visibilities set. So let's say it's like this. All right, so now when I go to F3, it may show up kind of all the way down here to the right. If you have hidden tracks, I'm not sure if you have hidden tracks or not. But if you have hidden tracks, it might do that even though it looks like it's here, but you go to your F3 and there is a setting, it's kind of subtle if you go here, that you could sync the project in mix console. So now if you come over, so depending on your settings, if you have the mix console synced with the project, so check those settings and it's just to the right. And if you have visibility or some tracks hidden, that could explain it. If you could let me know, that'd be great. All right, so we have a question from Chris Harrison. Is there a way to do long aleatoric pitch bends with strings through large intervals in Cubase? Most libraries don't have pitch bend, specifically Spitfire. Wondering if I can apply it to the audio. So it could really depend on the libraries. You know, some may not do it, but let's go ahead and just load up an instrument from HALion. Here, we'll just try a Iconica. All right, and let me just switch it to more legato patch. So here we could set, you know, this will do pitch bends. So it really depends on the playback engine if it's going to allow you to do it. So if you do it inside of HALion, you know, we could have pitch bend, and you may be able, let's see if it's a setting that's actually in. So we could adjust your tuning scale, but it's really going to be just a limitation of the actual instrument. So, but you could set the pitch bend here and set different ranges of pitch bend. So maybe I see you mentioned those with like the BBC SO. And you know, a lot of libraries don't do it because it does sound a bit unrealistic, but there may be different ways to have articulations to go between different notes where it sounds like you're kind of, you know, sliding the pitch, you know, kind of almost, you know, mimicking what maybe like what a synth is doing from a violin, you know, or you could do it for like fretless bass stuff. So, but you could definitely do it with, you know, different string libraries, such as Iconica, which is currently on sale. Okay. See different discussion of climate going on. All right. See, Michael Teams wants people to hit the like button. All right, and we appreciate Jazz Dude doing his vigilant modulation or moderation. All right, so we see, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we see, does Cubase have something like heat in Pro Tools? I assume that's just a like a saturation type thing. So even on your input channels, if you wanted to just come over here, every input source that you have, you could just come directly here and put saturation on the channel strip. So you could do that on the channel strip, or you could do it on as plugins, so you can record through the plugins. So, you know, there's 3 different saturations. So if you want tape saturation, tube saturation, there's other saturation plugins that you could record through as well. All right, so I just see a question or comment. I have a doubt that can we install acoustic agent in Groove? You know, so when we deal with Groove agent itself, so say we add Groove agent, depending on which kit is loaded. So we'll do the Groove agent SE, which is part of Cubase. So depending on which kit is loaded. So if I wanted to go to, like, one I use a lot is Forget the Past, that this would be an acoustic agent library. So Groove agent is the player that could play back, you know, kind of beat agent kits or acoustic agent kits. And if you have the full version of Groove agent, you have also the percussion agent as well. So, but yeah, you could definitely do acoustic agent kits directly in Groove agent. All right, so you see question, how do you convert a project for a contest like a MP3? So if you have a project and you wanted to create an MP3 of the particular project, all you have to do is come over here to export audio mixdown. And when you see the file type, you want to choose MPEG-1 layer 3, and that would be your MP3. So you could just simply take your file and export it as an MP3, export it as a full resolution audio file as well. So all right, so we see from Got Your, I'm not sure if this was after I did it. If you make a rack VST and try to render in place, it will render a blank audio track. If you had automation on a track and you move it, it will not copy the automation. It must be a bug with Cubase. So let's see if I still have that project open. Or I'll just recreate it again. So we're going to add our instrument rack. Okay, so I recorded my gibberish musical attempt. Let's go ahead and draw some automation in. Okay, and we will render this in place. All right, so we'll include the channel settings. All right, so we can see that the automation has automatically been included with the particular rendering. So the rendering includes the automation. So which makes sense. So now if I move this event, I could copy it at will, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding Got Your. So Agent K is fast on his moderation. Thank you. He's subtle, but good. See Paul Claridge just saying, thanks again, Greg. This is a fantastic thing you do, so I'm glad it's helpful for people. All right, and we see Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK. Glad you could join us today. And Spike Williams just says, wow, drag and drop from the Spectral Layers, so simple. Thanks, Greg. All right, see Michael Teams is going to a studio session. Thank you for all the ice cream distribution. I know everyone in Europe was appreciative. Have a good session. So question, will Iconica run on HALion Sonic SE? So yes, it will. So no problems there. Okay, so I think I've hit the end of the questions. So I know we had a bunch of questions that were sent in, and we'll get to some of the ones that were sent in from last week as well. All right, so we see Best Green Jesus also just saying thank you. Thanks for doing these. Always learn so much. That's great. Thank you. We're glad it's helpful for people. All right, so let me go to some of the questions that were mailed in. So we have more than usual. And I appreciate everyone's understanding last week with me getting called for a meeting unexpectedly. So part of having a job. Okay, so I'll open up a quick project here. Okay, so we have a question. What is the most common reason for using phase shift on a track? I'm referring to the phase function available for each track in Pre. And it says, I understand the technical term phase invert function when is needed. What I wonder is, what situations does the problem arise? Is it a microphone recording, etc.? Never for VST instruments. So generally, it is going to be, the vast majority of the time, it's going to be with recorded microphone instruments. So if we wanted to come here, let's say we had like a nice acoustic guitar, and I'll activate the project. That would help. All right, so let's say we have two microphones on a guitar, and if we're to kind of visualize kind of the waveform of the sound kind of flowing through the air, if we're to kind of visualize that, this is kind of what the waveform it represents. So we zoom into our waveform, we could see that we're going to have two microphones, and when the sound wave is going up in one microphone. And if we have two microphones on a source, we want the sound wave to go up on this second source as well to match. Because if one is going up and the other is going down, it would cancel out particular frequencies. So let's say, if we listen to this, we can see that these are going to be, pretty well in phase. And how you could check phase is often, or I guess technically you should say polarity, is just to kind of flip the polarity or flip the phase on different switches. So we'll come over here. I'm going to invert the phase on just this one track on a guitar. And we can hear how it gets kind of very small sounding. So when we click on the invert phase button here and we zoom in, we'll notice that as one of the channels is going up, the other channel, it would be going down, and that would cause those frequencies to cancel. So you see, as I click on the invert phase function, at that point, we can just toggle that to flip it. So when it's going downward below the zero crossing, that it would, it would just match up between the two channels. Now, sometimes people will put that on keyboard tracks. So, it could be pretty rare, but sometimes, a part of synthesis is you may just kind of flip the phase to kind of get an interesting sound. But the vast majority of times when you're doing phase for correction, it's going to be primarily for a multi-mic'd instrument setup, or if you recorded a bass amp and a like a direct signal from a bass, like a DI, sometimes you may notice that it's like, it doesn't have as much impact, that you would flip the phase of one, and then all of a sudden the sound will just come together. So sometimes it's going to be, for, like a direct recording with a mic'd recording, that are out of phase, or if the two microphones are slightly positioned, they may be out of phase with each other. So you'll notice that a lot of engineers, will be very precise, and like, especially those who are really good at drums, will just do like, they're constantly aware of the phase, and they'll actually measure like the distance between the microphones and the source to make sure that they're same. So like one common drum recording technique, I think it was Glenn Johns that had set this up, as like a 3 mic technique that was often used in the 60s, where you have like one kick drum mic, you have a mic over the kind of over the snare drum, and another mic kind of over the right shoulder. And to ensure the phase between those two microphones, often the drummer would just put 2 drumsticks on top of each other, and that would be the height for the mic, and they would take that's kind of the measurement, and then they would move it over to their, the drummer's right shoulder and put the microphone there, like above the floor tom often. And that way the phase relationship between those 2 microphones was the same distance. So that's often what we do, like correction for phase. So it's generally with, multi-mic'd instruments. All right, so I got a question, I think this is from David Reuter. Says, when I load the auto glockenspiel into HALion 6, it has one factory preset for chromatic percussion. After I load the sound in an instrument rack and I go to the pad section, on the lower left of the HALion window, there's a pull-down button to select presets of chords for the pads. After I select a preset, like analog string machine, it populates the 6 pads with individual chords. So let's go take a look. So let's say I just have a different instrument loaded up, but it should be, we'll see when we come over here, I have just a Rhodes patch loaded up, and I will come over here to the chord pads in HALion 6, and let's just choose analog strings. Okay, so I'll come here, and now we can have so we could trigger these. Okay, now I can trigger those chords with my mouse, but if I select record on a track, nothing records when I trigger the notes. How do I actually record those chord sounds I'm triggering with my mouse into Cubase? Also, my Arturia keyboard will play one individual notes, but how do you assign those individual pads to be triggered by a key or pad on your MIDI controller? Okay, so once we have our chords loaded up here, what you could do is just click on right click, and you'll see Learn Trigger Note. So I'm going to hit C1, and let's go to this one, and I'm going to play D1. So now when I play these particular notes, and we'll do E1 here, Learn Trigger Note, F1. All right, so now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sequence, and instead of playing these, because these aren't going to transmit MIDI, I don't think. Let me just check. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is just record these notes from my drum pad on these particular notes. So as we solo this, we'll just say... So now I've recorded just single notes, those C1, D1, E1, F1. So we go to look at the part, and now as we play it, those trigger notes, instead of playing just a single note, are playing and triggering the chords from the chord pad in the instrument. So once you have the chords defined here, just right click, click on Learn Trigger Note, hit the pad, and then you should be able to use those pads to just trigger whatever particular notes, chords that you want. Just like that. So let me know if that helps, David. I hope you and Kristen are well. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. I have an Apple M1 using Cubase 12.03. I'm running Cubase in native mode, not Rosetta. I have a plugin by Universal Audio that's supposed to run native with the latest update, but it is stuck in the blocked list of plugins. I have a total of 3 plugins and 2 are okay, but the third is in the block list. Is there a way to reset and rescan all the plugins? Thank you. Yeah, so I think finally, like the UAD Spark is finally VST3 and M1 native. I think they had an update last week. But if we come over here, let's go to your studio menu and go to the VST plugin manager. If you go to the block list, I don't have any plugins here, but you can choose to, often you would just come right over here and choose to remove. You can manually remove a plugin from the block list if you have one that shows up here. So you could try to do it there. And obviously, it's a brand new format for Universal Audio. So you might want to check with them to see if they have any updates because, we've been waiting 14 years for them to do VST3 plugins. So now they should be able to do it, but obviously it's brand new. So make sure that you let them know of that, but that's how you could probably do it in Cubase. I don't have any blocked plugins, unfortunately, and I don't have a license of Spark at all. So. All right, so we have a question. A general question for Groove Agent and HALion. For example, is it possible to accidentally overwrite a factory patch? How is a factory patch overwritten? Do I have to take an active action to destroy a factory patch? In case, how to restore factory patches? So when you overwrite and create a preset, it's going to automatically put it into user presets. So your factory presets will always be maintained. That's how it is for HALion and Groove Agent. There could be some other plugins that don't follow the VST3 preset management, but basically, as you modify and you save a particular preset, then it goes into the user preset folder. All right, so we have a question. I work at a film composer studio in LA, and we do a lot of importing data from project to project. We use rack instruments to connect it to VE Pro and 2 sampler computers and MIDI tracks in Cubase. I've tried using the import tracks from project function, but it doesn't quite work as expected. When I'm trying to import data to our template by using the option match tracks. The data is imported to the right tracks, but on a different track version. Is there a way to import tracks from project, match tracks, and have the regions just show up on the corresponding MIDI tracks without creating new track versions? So there's kind of a workaround, a macro that I found that might help with this. So let's say I have like a Mellotron sound here, and I wanted to take and import a Mellotron project from a different project and match it just like what you did, or just as you described. So I will come over here and let's say we'll go to import tracks from project. I'm going to choose off of Beatles or Stones here. So let's just choose this. So it's the Mellotron flute track that I want. So I'm going to come right over here and do the Mellotron flute track. And I'm going to say select matching. So this way, this track will get put onto this particular track here. And as it does this, if there's data, not to kind of overwrite that data, it will create a new track version. Okay, so we do this and we see that it's created a new track version. So I have this, my original, this as my imported data. And I assume that you probably want to kind of merge these two together. So I made a macro and I'll show you this. So we go to key commands. There is kind of a function. I just called this. So what I did is I created a macro where we said track versions, create lanes from versions. And then I wanted to select all the events on the track we could mute the events, unmute events, and then choose select none. So these are the 5 steps. And, and if I just did the track versions, create lanes from versions, the other track versions, the other parts would come up into this particular lane and be muted. So that's why I did these other things. So let's say I wanted to take the content of this track version and this track version that I imported, and I want them to both be on the same track together, all happily. So I'll just come back. So let's say we're here. I've now imported those. So I'm going to run this macro, and we'll just call it. So now it's created a new track version that is a combination of the 3. So if you do that, you could just trigger that particular macro with a keyboard shortcut, and then you could have all of the other data. So if I didn't create the macro and I just come to project, to track versions, and I say create lanes from versions, you can see how these all show up muted, which is probably not what you want to do, especially if you have like hundreds of little parts. So hence why I just created that macro, and I'll show the steps in the macro one more time. So we'll come here to the key commands, and we'll open up this macro here. So once again, the first step is to create the lanes from the version. Then we're going to select all the tracks. We're going to first mute all of the events, then unmute all the events, and then choose select none so that none are selected. So once we have that as our macro, we'll come right over here to our range or to our macros, and now be able to have both events all happily coexist on one new track version. You could go back and forth between the others, but that should be a pretty seamless. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we have a question mailed in. I'm working with an external controller on an Android tablet. It's called TouchOSC. I can control almost everything in Cubase with generic remote in combination with Project Logical Editor and key commands. Now my question. A lot of controls send out their status. They're in like mute or solo, so I actually see these also light up on my tablet. That's very useful. So it doesn't matter where I change the setting in Cubase itself or on the tablet, but it doesn't do this with the quantize settings. For instance, from quarter to eighth note or snap on and off, beat/bar. So I don't get feedback on the tablet controller when I change the settings in Cubase. Can it be done? So I know that, some of the functions using the generic, I know some people that have TouchOSC. I don't have a license of TouchOSC, so I haven't really worked with it. But not all functions are going to be transmitted back from Cubase. I could do some more research and see if I could get a license of TouchOSC to play around with it. To see if I could get those things to work. But I know some things will kind of, be transmitted back and some won't. But I could do some more research on it. If you want to email me again, just to give me a reminder, I can see if I get a TouchOSC license. Okay, so we have a question. In a video player, is it possible to choose a size mode via keyboard shortcut? All right, so let's import a quick video track here. So let me just import a video file. Okay, so let's say if I go to, I have this. So I don't think that there's a default way, but let's see if we can do it with maybe a workspace. So let's say we'll do, so we'll add a workspace. So we'll say, and let's say if I wanted to go to, have it much larger. I won't do it in full screen, but close. let's come over here and let's add a workspace. We'll say large video. All right, so these workspaces can be triggered via keyboard shortcuts. So if we come over here, let's just get to the workspace. So it went back to our small video. And let's see if I just do my large video. So while there isn't direct keyboard shortcuts to resize the video, you can have keyboard shortcuts to a workspace where each workspace could have the video be independently sized, and they could be set for the particular project, or they could be set globally. So if you wanted to do that, so I would try setting up the keyboard shortcuts to trigger particular workspaces with different video sizes and see if that works. Okay, we have a question. Could you demonstrate a few examples of using pre and post faders on inserts and on sends, and how to set them up correctly, and explain some of the advantages of using both? Also, how are pre and post faders set up and used in group tracks? Okay, so let's see. I wanted to, so let's say if I have like a little guitar part here. Okay, so let's say I want to take, all right, so let's look at our guitar amp that we have here. And we go to our master section. So let's say I have my guitar here as my VST amp rack, and I have it as a pre-insert to start with. So let's say we wanted to look at our pre section, and we look at the meters here. So I'm going to go to my mix console. Okay, and all right, so let's say, and as we adjust our fader, so when we're in pre, this is the signal hitting the inserts before the channel. So let's say as I adjust my level here, and we look at the levels going on in the guitars, we can see that adjusting my levels here has no impact on the gain structure feeding the guitar amp. But if I move this to a post fader, we can see the gain structure is being fed. So if you want to get like different distortion amounts, I could just feed the gain structure. So the level that's going into the effect is based upon the fader level, whereas this has no impact if it's before. Now it's just the same volume. And let's say I want to take that guitar and let's do kind of the same with an effect send. So if we wanted to come here, let's go ahead and just listen to it dry here. So let's say I want to do like a reverb. All right, so now we have this. So if I adjust my pre-send level, and now I'll make it so we'll move it to pre-fader. So now as I adjust, I could adjust the level and it doesn't affect the gain structure going to the guitar. So I still have the same amount of reverb regardless of where the fader is set to. And we go to post fader, the amount of reverb is determined by how much signal. So that will affect the gain stage. And let's say, okay, we'll send this to a group channel now. So we'll just do group channel. So now as we play this, we'll go ahead and move it to pre-fader. So regardless of where my fader is at now, it's still going into the group and doesn't affect how much is being sent to the group. And now when we go to post fader, the level of bit that's being sent to the group is contingent upon the level of the particular track right there. So let me know if that makes sense, David. Again, I hope you and Kristen are well. Look forward to coming and signing the board at Big Tent next time I'm in Nashville. Okay, question. Most times I work with the combined selection tool. However, recently I noticed that if I click with the range selection cursor in the project window example to change focus, it will select the related track. How can I disable this function? Okay, so when we come over here, let's say sometimes you may have like a range selection and then you click somewhere else to overwrite that range selection. So I think that this is just going to be a preference. So let's go to preferences, and you notice that my behavior didn't do that, but let's say we go to editing. I think it's track selection follows event selection. So I'm going to turn that on. So now if I have a range selection and I click here to kind of just get away to, you know, change the focus, we'll notice that wherever I click, that particular track is now selected. So try to come over here to the preferences and under editing, track selection follows event selection, and then just click apply. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. I want to configure my Steinberg QC controller. This is kind of the CMC controllers, which is small MIDI, with the MIDI remote, and I can't. The 8 potentiometers are only assigned CC that I can't modify, and the other buttons don't allow to be configured. With the other models, the CH or TP, I had no problem reconfigured them to my desire. Any clue how to do it on a QC? So, you know, as soon as it really doesn't matter kind of what controllers are actually being transmitted, you know, so if I wanted to come here to my choice OS controller, you know, I think that this is just, you know, MIDI CC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, you know, once we know what Cubase is set up here, so if I wanted to, regardless of what knobs are actually controlling this, you know, once we have the MIDI CC, it doesn't have to be any particular message. So when we go to like the MIDI mapping, at this point, you know, we would just move whatever parameter we want. And then if you wanted to just go to the focused quick controls, you know, you can say, okay, do this and apply the mapping. Move the knob here and click on the parameter and then apply mapping. So whatever CC is, so it doesn't have to match whatever MIDI CC the device is spitting out, can be reassigned to do whatever particular functions you want in Cubase. So you shouldn't have to do any reassigning of what CCs are being transmitted from the QC control. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Stefan from Sweden. Hope you're doing well. It is so that I have to reinstall my Windows 10 data and I run Cubase 12.3. It does not start. I get the error message. It is internal to find a procedure start address. Set 3 as DPI, host spring behavior in the DLL file C/program file /Steinberg/Cubase 12/Cubase 12exe. I've installed Cubase 11 and Wavelab 11.1 and it works. I've been trying to talk support, but it did not help. Can you help me? So I did a little research on that particular error message, and it seems like it's maybe an older incompatible version of Windows. So I think, you know, so make sure that you have like Windows 10, you know, sometimes we see this on Windows 8.1 or Windows 8. but it could be an earlier version of Windows 10. So if you did a system restore or an image back to like an earlier version of Windows 10, but see if you have, I think it's 21H1 is kind of the version past of Windows 10 that will work, that Cubase is designed for. But I think it's indicative that it's an earlier version of Windows that you might want to update. Okay, so let's go back to our live questions. I hope that everyone has learned a tip or trick, and if you have, please feel free to hit the like button. And we hope everyone has learned a couple of tips. Let's go back to our live questions. Okay, just kind of going through some content, some of the questions here. Okay, so I just see a question. How to fix Cubase 9 problems in Mac OS Monterey, for example, a waveform not showing, white screen. So I'm trying to remember, I'm trying to go back to when Monterey was going. So one thing that you could try is as you start Cubase is, I think that version will work in Monterey. It's sometimes confusing with all the different Mac OS versions. But if it was working previously, what I would do is to restart with the preferences disabled. So I would go to as you're starting Cubase, like right after you double click on the Cubase icon, or as Cubase is starting, hold down Command plus Option plus Shift and hold it down. And then as you start, try to just simply, you'll get prompted if you wanted to temporarily disable the program preferences and see if that makes a difference. So try that and see if that behaves better. So it could be maybe corrupt preferences. All right, just reading through. Okay, so we have a question. When I use the arranger track and press flatten chain, my bars stick to a specific number and I can't continue making more. Don't know if I'm doing something wrong, so let me give it a shot. Okay, so I have some arranger chain here, so let me go ahead and flatten it. All right, so let me just see if I can record some more info. So it seemed like everything was fine here, and if I wanted to make copies of events, that I could just come right over there. So let me just... So let me know, Ali, if that's what you're doing in the process. All right, we see that Michael Pierce has to take off. He has an early day, so we hope it's temperature is cooler there for you in the UK tomorrow. Sorry you guys have to deal with that. All right, so we see a nice comment from Ali. Says, Greg, just want to say thank you live because I've learned so much from you and it's such a benefit for Cubase that has someone like you to make these hangouts and share the knowledge. Hope the best for you. Thank you very much. I always feel that if you have an expertise in anything, that it's almost a responsibility to share the knowledge, and I think it's the only thing to do. And it makes me happy to be able to help people kind of realize their creativity. All right. All right, we see Mark Rabin has made it. All right. Hope you're doing well, Mark. I was thinking of you the other day. I saw the 21 car accident in Montana. Okay, reading through comments. All right, see Sable Winters is on a plane, so we'll see you on Friday. We'll let the plane have its navigation systems without worry. But thanks for joining us. Have a safe flight. All right, so we just see a comment. I'm using Cubase AI and don't feel the need to upgrade. On the contrary, I prefer less options / clutter. I think one of the great things with Cubase is you can really customize it to have very minimal, very minimal options and tasks that are in front of you. And they're not always kind of pounding you in the head in use, but all those features, like as you need them, like if you get into a dark corner and you need to get out, that feature in the more higher end versions of Cubase will be there as well. But if we have lots of people that are happy with the Cubase LE, Cubase AI. Okay, we see just question. Hi, Greg. Joe from Rochester, New York. Glad to see you, Joe. Hope you're doing well. Hope all is well. Is there an easy way to delete, rename user-created VST presets? So the one thing that I do so say if we come over here to our user presets, let's say I just wanted to... So if we actually go, let's look at in Media Bay here. So let's say default, we could say, let's go to user content. So let's say I wanted to come over here to like VST presets. All right, so let's say I probably made a few. Okay, so I have these I have these presets. So I think if we kind of just scroll over here, Joe, that one of the paths that you can see the path. Hang on just one second, my son's knocking on the door. Sorry about that. All right, so but one of these, I think if we come over here, we could go to the path. So let's come over here to the settings, and let's say media, and we could choose path. So if we wanted to come here, we could just go directly. So we could, or you could, without doing that, you could probably just reveal in Finder or reveal in Explorer. And then you could see all the presets and you could select and delete them there. So I think without even having to go to the path, if we just right click, these will all be saved into the same folder, right click. And then you could just, reveal in path. So let me just, reveal in Finder. So we could just kind of come over here, reveal in Finder, and that will take you directly to the folder directly from the media bay. Okay, so we see a question from Ray Mitchell. Hi, Greg. Would really like to see a demonstration of warping multi-track drums to the grid. Particularly, I'd like to see this done with very fast and busy drum parts as found in metal. So I may not have like a speed metal demonstration, but if you have one, I'd be happy to use it. Let's come over here. I usually use this one from my friend, the great drummer, Fred Corey. It's kind of a recovering rock star now, but let's say I have like these drums here. So let's say I have these in a folder, and if I put my click track on, and we'll see, we're gonna have a drum fill. So a little late. Looks like we have a snare roll coming up. All right, so just a bit off. So first thing we could do is I want to find just a couple of hit points. So I'm going to go to hit point detection here, and we'll just say edit hit points. And what we want to do is to kind of find the hit points of the drums and not what's bleeding. So we have some other drums here. So those are the ones that are bleeding. So we'll take those hit points. Let's take our snare, and we'll make sure that we adjust our hit points accordingly here. So and let's find, this kind of starts with a hi-hat. So we'll adjust our hit points. So usually just kind of coming over here. Okay, so we found kind of hit points for a couple of sources. So we're going to put these into a folder, and what we want to do is to just do enable group editing here. So let's say I'm going to go to my quantize setup. So we'll go to edit to our quantize panel, and what I want to do now is we're going to select these, and I want to assign priorities. So I'm going to say my kick has a high priority, my snare top has a priority, and let's find our hi-hat. And we'll put not our rack 1 tom, we'll just come here and let's just do our hi-hat if I click in the right area. All right, so I'll just put kick, snare, hi-hat as my priorities. What it's done is it's automatically kind of found the particular drum, and it's placed our hit points there. All right, so what I'm going to do now is to slice based upon these priorities that we've defined. I'm going to slice the particular drums. Okay. And now I'm going to say, let's quantize these to 16th notes. So once we do this, and we could put it into audio warp or just quantize mode. So I'm going to say, let's do our quantize mode. So now as we do this, it's going to shift a bunch of those little phrases around. Now, as it does this, it's going to leave little gaps. And what we want to do is to crossfade those particular gaps so that when we listen to it now with the click, you can see that they've all been kind of cleaned up. And where there was like that snare fill of 16th notes here, that now that has been cleaned up. So if we go back a couple of steps and listen to that snare fill again, and again, redo that. So little things you could do. So that's how you could do kind of like a multi-track drum quantizing very easily. All right. All right, so you see problem still there on Cubase 9. I tried what you asked me to do. Is there anything else I could do? Check to make sure that, check on the Cubase 9, since that was like 5 years ago, make sure that that is working and designed to work under Monterey. So if it's, I'm not sure if this was with the Monterey question. I'm just trying to remember. But if you could let me know if that was also working with Monterey before, if it's something new that changed. All right, so Mark Rabin wants people to hit the like button on the way out. All right, we see a nice comment from Mark Rabin. Says, thank you, Greg. You're the best part of Cubase. Well, there's a lot of, I get to take the public face a lot of times for wonderful stuff that the team in Hamburg has created and planned for everyone. So there's a lot of people who do, just tremendous work, that don't get the recognition that should. All right, so just see, how do you delete a temporary e-license controller? So I'm not sure if it's with the e-licenser. So often, sometimes when you uninstall it, you can, if something times out, if it was like a trial version, I think that there are some ways of, if you're on a Windows platform, where you could go into like the reg edit registry and maybe manually remove stuff. I don't know if it's officially supported, but you might be able to find it on Google. I've never done it, so. All right, so we see Gerald Ely will be joining us on Friday, so thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. All right, so we just see only feature I've been missing is a decent time stretch algorithm like Elastic. So Cubase has Elastic time stretching in it, so you should be all set. All right, so we got a question from Soren. Can the user ratings for HALion Sonic instruments to stars be transferred and switched around in some way? My girlfriend wants her personal stars on my computer temporarily. So I think that that's going to be stored. So So maybe on the Media Bay, if you copy over the Media Bay database, which I think is a mediabay.db to your computer, and put yours somewhere else, that you might be able to import like the Media Bay ratings from someone else. It might be, I'm inclined to say no, but you might also want to check to see if the Media Bay ratings are included in the profile manager. I don't think they are off the top of my head, but I think if you copy over the mediabay.db, I know composers will do that so that their assistants will be able to do all the ratings for them, and then just copy the file over to the main composer's computer. All right, we're glad to hear Mark Raven saying that his dog Stella is doing well. So, okay, so we see question, how to set up send channel sending to multiple tracks. All right, so if I wanted to send all these tracks to a particular send, like all the selected tracks, I could select the tracks, right click, add track, and then we say effects channel to selected channels, and now they're all being fed to the reverb. So when you come over here and go to the sends, you can see that they're all being sent to the reverb now. So again, select multiple tracks, right click, go to add track, and add effects channel to selected tracks. All right, so we see comment says audio sounds terrible when I try to set it to follow a chord track. Even small loops don't pitch right. So the audio following the chord track is not for polyphonic or multi-note material, so it's not really designed to work with chords. What it's designed to do is monophonic material, like a voice, a bass, a saxophone part, stuff like that. So it's not going to take like your piano or guitar audio parts and follow the chord track. So. All right, so I think we see some discussion, Jazz Dude, about Junkie XL's setup. Yeah, so he has like a whole rooms in his house as kind of his machine rooms. So it's very hot in those particular rooms. All right, we see Mark Raven he got a machine with 1 terabyte of RAM and never got it to work, so all the RAM was returned. So I'm sorry to hear that. It would have been fun to see what a terabyte of RAM could do. All right, so I'm at the end of the questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that come in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. And I apologize again for last Friday having to have such an abbreviated live stream with the getting called into a meeting unexpectedly. So I appreciate everyone understanding with that, and should have hopefully no more interruptions like that. So they understand that I have this time kind of, for meeting with customers. All right. So we'll see if there's more questions coming in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up just a little early. And thanks again for all the wonderful questions. And again, we'll be doing this again on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. You see Richard Thompson is trying to use a guitar part to follow the chord track. So, yeah, maybe in the future that will happen. It's still very hard to do. Some things have attempted it, but the actual use of it isn't quite there yet. Okay, so we just see from Ray Mitchell says, would have loved to have seen in-place audio warp on drums. So if you are here with, your drums, if you wanted to do the hit points on the drum. So if I have all of these drums selected, I will come directly here to my free warp. And then if I wanted to, let's say where I have this particular snare drum roll here, I could just kind of put in all my warp markers across all my drum tracks. And when doing this, we could put it on phase coherent mode directly here. So as we do this, we have these in audio warp. So give me just a minute here. Let's get all these files bounced. So I'll just put a couple warp markers in place there. Okay, so I'll just place our warp markers. Yeah, so, if you wanted to do this style of editing, you can just now, do that across. It's probably not the best warp marker editing, but you could now just come right over there and be able to kind of just dial in and do kind of your warp editing like that. All right, we see a question. Greg, what's your vision at Cubase in 5 years from now? Will you intend to implement AI functions, redesigning old graphics, which should be implemented, and which direction should be taking? Best regards. So, everyone always wants like their particular thing of Cubase, and it's pretty amazing, where Cubase is developed. I can remember being, I think it was an AES show in New York, like 15 years ago, like, wow, what could they add to Cubase? And, once we sit down, we could always come up with different things. I think, it's always a difficult balance of, having advanced features that are deep and still making them accessible and approachable to users. I think we'll see in 5 years, we'll know if like Dolby Atmos and immersive is taken off, or everyone's still just going to be listening with headphones, so that'll be interesting to see how that develops. Kind of transitioning from, maybe I think like the VST Live is really interesting, and being able to kind of, maybe more like recording and taking your one Cubase project from inception to stage to being able to deliver film, in all the different aspects without having to utilize stuff. And you can see, maybe integration of Dorico engines with Cubase. That would be cool in 5 years, but it'll be interesting to see. And I can't wait. And I hope I'm still here 5 years from now, celebrating my 35th anniversary of Steinberg, still doing these live streams. So. All right, we'll see. There's more questions. Okay, so we have a question. I can't figure out how to rearrange or delete a track from within the console view. I have to go back to the track view to delete tracks or arrange their order. So that's how it is currently set up. So I'm not sure. I don't have a good explanation why it's not in there. It seems pretty easy thing to do. But you'd have to do it on the main project window. And I think a lot of people, by the time they get into there, may already have worked with, aligning stuff in the lower zone mixer so that when you're in the big mixer, like a lot of those decisions are made and you could make these changes within the lower zone mixer quite easily and see that reflected. So, but not everyone is kind of doing that, and I may do that more because I can't move the tracks into bigger mixers. I'm not sure, but you're not missing anything with that. So. All right, we'll see if more questions come in. If not, I'll go ahead and wrap up. We know it's summer. We know it's very hot for so many people in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're all jealous of Australians and people in the Southern Hemisphere now, I'm sure. Okay, so we have a question. Is it better to use the internal or external renderer? So I would say, if you wanted to do, the internal renderer will kind of give you the same information. I would say the external renderer is better if you're, going to be utilizing, just if you're utilizing maybe a hardware RMU, but a lot of people aren't necessarily doing that. So I think the internal renderer is going to be fine. I don't think, I would say that there's a lot of people that bought external renderers that, feel that it's not as necessary now that the capabilities are included internally. Okay, so we see a quick question. How can I add a tap tempo macro? All right, so there's a number of ways to kind of do this. So let's say if I wanted to just do a new project here. All right, so one is if we go to the project and there's a beat calculator. So if we just say tap tempo, you could just hit the space bar. And that will give you kind of a tempo reading right there. So, or you could click with your mouse. If you have just a MIDI part, so let's say I add an instrument track and I'll just choose the instrument to no VST instrument and I just record. So let's say, okay, now I'm just recording and I'll just turn my click off. So I'm just recording like MIDI notes on, let's say, every beat. Speed up and let's slow down. So now that I've recorded, just did a tap tempo, I could come over to my MIDI and go to functions and choose merge tempo from tapping. It'll say I tapped quarter notes. And then you could do stuff like that. So you could just do the merge tempo from tapping. So just come right over there and that will create a tempo map for you if you want to do tap tempo. All right, so we have a question. Do the renderers clash with each other? No. So, in Cubase, you have only the internal renderer, and with Nuendo, you have internal and external renderers. So, all right, see, there's more questions. right, I'll wait another 10 seconds or so, then we'll wrap because I know there's a delay by the time I speak to when everyone hears. Yes, I see a comment about using the arranger track to select different sections of the song. So I think what maybe Jazz Dude was talking about was rearranging the tracks in the mix console to change the order of that. All right, thank you for the kind words, David. Hope you're doing well. All right, so with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up. I'm going to go say hi to our new cat and make sure he feels welcome in our home. So I want everyone to have a wonderful rest of the week. We'll see everyone on Friday's live stream. So I just see is Friday is Zoom. So I think it's going to be the week after. So I think Friday would be the 22nd. So I think it'll be a week from Friday would be the Zoom meetup, Mark. All right. All right, so with that, I will go ahead and wrap up. Thanks everyone for all the great questions, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.